Everyone knows how talk therapy works, but nobody really knows how psychedelic-assisted therapy works. Don't worry, I got you. Hi everybody, my name is Jill. Welcome back to the Journey Sage, and this is the channel where I talk about my healing process, healing PTSD from childhood trauma with psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy. And the question I get a whole lot was like, well, how does it work? I know what it's like to go to a therapist. How does this whole process, how is it different? How does it work? So the first thing to realize is that during this medical procedure, because this is a medical procedure dealing with some sort of mental ailment, in my instance it was PTSD, I like to break down the process into three main parts: preparation, the journey day, and integration. And I was not a math major, so I keep these percentages really easy. Preparation was 40% of the process, the journey day was 20, and integration was 40. So I think you can see that the before and after the journey day, super important for healing. So let's break down what each of those things are. Preparing for a psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy session, and let's assume we've gone through finding qualified people, we've gotten our health screen, we are off of any particular medicine that might be a contraindication. We've moved through all of those things and we are actively preparing for a psychedelic journey for therapeutic purposes. The easiest way that I think is a good way to think about preparation, think about setting the GPS. So my preparation was all about talking to my therapist and guide about things that were, things I wanted to work on, things that were bothering me. For me with PTSD, it was all about hypervigilance and all about fear. So if you want to use this GPS analogy, I was setting the GPS for the journey to help me stop being so scared all the time. I mean, that's fundamentally what it was. I had a great life. Everything was nice and stable. I was terrified all the time. So talking to my therapist, talking to my guide, asking every single embarrassing question because I hadn't worked with psychedelics before and just heard, egg in the frying pan stories. So all of that time, and no exaggeration, my preparation was easily 2 months per journey. We really took our time. I had a lot of trauma to deal with, so I needed that time to be comfortable enough to be able to even approach some of the trauma. So the second part of this whole process is the actual journey day. And this is the day where you're going to be working with qualified professionals with a therapeutic dose. And you are going to start processing the trauma. Unfortunately, you kind of have to feel it to heal it. So sometimes those journeys are unpleasant, and that's kind of what you're signing up for. I never really found any of my MDMA journeys to be unpleasant, because for me, I was just reliving my childhood and that's kind of all I knew. But those journey days are nothing like a stereotypical recreational psychedelic experience. They are therapy. And the way I like to describe it is that, how you set the GPS during your preparation? The journey day is you've arrived at the destination. You've gotten there. The third component is what's called integration. And the time period after a psychedelic journey allows for a lot of neuroplasticity in the brain, which is why Michael Pollan named his book How to Change Your Mind, because neuroplasticity allows us to actually change our mind, change how we think about things, allow different perspectives to come in and allow our opinion to change. The same way you might, try some food as an adult that you hated as a kid and all of a sudden your perspective changes. You can do that with mental health issues through psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy. So the integration process is you got to the GPS location during the journey. The integration process is this really how things were or not? So think about the idea of going back to a childhood home or a childhood playground or a childhood elementary school with you as an adult. you're going to see that particular location very differently. Everything's going to look really tiny in elementary school as an adult, whereas as a kid, it all seemed appropriate. The integration is the time where you, and dealing with trauma specifically, where you start looking at different memories and realizing there's a completely different way of thinking about that situation, because those memories were created when you were a child or when I was a child. I didn't have the perspective as an adult. So a really great example of an integration shift, and this happened like way, very deep in my therapy, it wasn't that my parents didn't love me. It was that they didn't have the emotional capacity to love me appropriately the way a parent should love a child. And why did they not have that emotional capacity? Because they were not loved appropriately as children. They were just kind of moving through life and they really didn't know any better. That's a huge shift from I'm not lovable, my parents didn't love me, to they did the very best they could. They absolutely loved me. They just didn't have the tools to be able to show love in an appropriate manner. Very often the manner was very controlling and very mean and in other ways that really weren't conducive to bringing up a child well, because they were not brought up well. So you see how that perspective shift happens? Sometimes those perspective shifts are immediate. Sometimes they take a little bit of time. A good amount of integration time, days, weeks, months, is very appropriate when you're working with psychedelics. All right. And then lastly, I think what's important to understand is that it's not like you're taking a psychedelic every day or every week. It doesn't work like an SSRI. It's absolutely a specific procedure that gets scheduled. You may need multiple procedures. In the MAPS clinical research, they worked with 3 MDMA journeys for PTSD that happened to align very well with my particular healing experience. It was after the integration of the 3rd session that I no longer qualified for that PTSD diagnosis. So what you need to understand is the actual process for the particular procedure day, and that you might need more than one procedure. May or may not. It differs for everybody. Everybody's a different place. And there is no particular, at least research hasn't found, the ideal spacing between journeys. For me, my therapist pretty much let me lead. And so I knew when I was no longer making those perspective shifts and I still felt fear, that's when I knew I was ready for another session. This may or may not be the case as we move forward with more research. This was just my particular situation. So there you go. If you remember 40-20-40, you pretty much have information that is more in depth than like 95% of the people out there. Preparation, journey day, integration, that's the medical process, and you may have to repeat it depending upon your level of trauma and how far you get with every particular journey. So I get all these questions all the time. I have a 5-email free course. I'll throw the URL in here and in the description bar, because people are always like, well, is it a turnkey thing? How much work is it? How much time is it? And so I made an email course to kind of help people out. If you want to hear my particular story of year-long healing with 3 therapeutic journeys, I wrote a memoir. I even give you transcripts from the 3rd journey to really see how deep some of the trauma was. I have an intention setting workbook. They're both up on Amazon. And of course, you can always go to the JourneySage.com. I've got lots of articles, podcasts, lots and lots of resources that are over there for you too. And so until next time, take care.